Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Chloe Jones on the podcast. She's coming to us all the way from Florida, where, dear God, I don't even want to talk about the weather. We're not even going to talk about it. I know it's a sore subject, but I bring it up enough. She mentioned we're recording this a few days after Christmas, and it was 71 degrees there, and I'm already starting to freak out right now just thinking about how perfect that must be. But yeah, she's on here to share her health and fitness journey and just discuss all things health and fitness. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Chloe, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, ditching the weather questions. So before I distract myself, to get things started, Chloe, why don't you just give us your backstory on what inspired and motivated you to get in shape and how that led to where you're at right now?
So right now I'm a senior in college and I was never particularly active throughout high school or anything like that. Like I didn't grow up like being extremely into sports or anything. Matter of fact, I hadn't so much as briskly walked a mile before I went off to college. So I was not blessed, I guess you could say. And then I went off to college and I joined ROTC, and there were a lot of people that had been athletic all their life, and I felt kind of out of place. Like I was the slowest, and I was damn sure not anything compared to like what some of these other kids were doing. Um, and so then I kind of started to try to become more athletic. Like I would start doing like push-ups in my room or whatever else. Um, right before I went off to college, I went through a pretty bad breakup. So that combined with coming off to college and everybody being more athletic than you, I was like entering my revenge era. That's kind of how it started, I guess you could say. And I started I started going, and once I actually entered a gym instead of doing push-ups in my room and stuff, I realized that it was a really good way for me to like cope with feelings. It was also a really good way for me to connect to my dad back home because he's really into lifting and powerlifting, so we always had something to talk about. From there, I started, and I know a lot of people go through ebbs and flows. They'll go for a little while and then they'll stop going for a little while, kind of on and off. But I started, and then I never stopped. Like it's been 5 days a week since the very first day that I actually stepped foot into a gym. My second semester of my freshman year of college.
What do you honestly think if you were to go back to like your senior year of high school and look at your competition photos from bodybuilding? What do you honestly think that version of you would think?
I would be so confused. I would be beyond confused. Actually, I went to the gym one time ever in high school, and it was with my childhood friend, and it was terrible. I hated it. I was like, I don't know why people do this. This is disgusting. In my defense, though, it was like my first time ever at the gym, and we did a 3 hour long leg day, and I don't think that I could walk for like 3 weeks. So I would be very confused, honestly, very confused.
I just that change that happens in such a quick period of time. And at what point in your journey did you realize, or did you realize anything about competing? And at what point did you have that itch to be like, hey, maybe I should step on stage and just see what that's all about?
So I got a job at the local gym here, kind of one of the more commercial gyms, but the nicer, it's a powerhouse gym technically. And at that point, I had only been working out for 4 months, so not very long at all. And one of the other workers there, I didn't know any woman that competed or anything like that. And he worked for the personal training company that was within that gym. And he was actually doing a competition. And one day he said to me, he's like, you've only been working out for a few months and you already look like really good. You should use my coach. And I kind of really struggled with it because then he was like kind of like pushing like come on, use my coach, use my coach. So he urged me to use his coach, and then I was very unsure because I knew like there was something in me that just knew that it was going to be a shift in my life. And I went to my dad and I was just like, I'm really not sure. Like, this is a huge step. I don't know any women that do this. And I would be that coach's first ever female competitor. And my dad really urged me. He was like, it's going to be something completely different. But my dad has been around a lot of bodybuilders and stuff like that, and he just really was like, I think you might be made for it. I think you might shock yourself. And so, yeah, only 4 months into working out, I got a coach, and then 4 months later 3 months later did a competition. Yeah, so not very long at all.
Yeah, that's crazy. What was that like going from that mindset though before, like in high school, where you didn't really do anything that athletic, to now you're doing one of the most challenging things that you can possibly do athletic wise, which is prepare for a bodybuilding show. What was that like, just going and switching to that mindset? Because I could not imagine a bigger just difference in a mindset than from not doing anything really athletically to preparing for a bodybuilding show.
Yeah, so my very first day on a diet, so my first coach, we did macros, and I shit you not, like when I worked out for those 4 months, after every time I would work out, and I was never on the heavier side, but I was definitely never like, I was never super duper skinny, except for a short period of time I was. When I was going through that breakup, I was like sad, not eating. But I would go get a McChicken and a fries and a Coke after every single time that I worked out. And then so go from that. And then all of a sudden having a coach who baseline gives you macros, like first day only like 75 grams of carbs, was like insane. And so on my very first day, this is the one and only time that I have ever cheated on my diet in the last 2 years, was the first day of my prep. I had like, I broke down and I had like a 20-piece of wings on the first day, the very first day. And I didn't think that I would be able to, like, I was like, oh, maybe this isn't, for me, because that very first day I couldn't. And so, but I hated the way that I felt about myself after that. Like, it was terrible. I was like, oh my gosh, like, but my training style has really developed over the last 2 years, I would say. Like, it wasn't balls to the wall right off the bat. That the first coach that I had he had me on 5 days a week, but it was a lot of like 4 exercises, 3 sets of 12, and then from there, like, I've just gotten more and more like intense with it. Like, I almost get lost in the workout, if that makes sense. Like, I'm very blessed in the sense that I wake up pretty motivated every day to work out. It's very rare, like normally deep into a prep where I'm like, oh, I really don't want to work out. For the most part, every morning I'm like, I just want to go and get, you know.
What was that like, seeing your body just go through that transformation, especially as you get close to that show look where you sort of look so alien to what you're used to? What was that like to just look in the mirror and just see that change?
So I would actually say that I know most girls, the further in prep that they get, the closer they get to competition, the more confident that they feel. But I've actually really struggled with the complete opposite. The deeper into my prep, the less confident that I am about myself. And then I'll look back on pictures, like just now, am I posting reels from when I was lean, and it's months later, because at the time when I took those videos, like, I thought that I looked super like flat and depleted, or I didn't think that I looked lean enough. Like, I'll see all these photos and I saved the photos because I learned from my first prep. Like, I barely had any photos from my first prep because I was just not in the right headspace. And now, like, I told myself I'm going to save the stuff even if I don't like it right now, because I'm going to want to look back at it. um so it was weird. Like, I definitely, even for the first one, like, I didn't think that I had any muscle to me really, but I just I get internal very much so in my preps. It's kind of a bad habit.
Well, that's this entire sport, is it's just a mental struggle that most people don't understand because they'll just notice the physical side of it. But I also love to talk genetics on this podcast because no matter how hard I trained, no matter what I took, no matter what I ate, I would never look just like someone else in the gym, just because unfortunately everyone's built differently. But on top of that, whenever someone first gets started, they always have one body part that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And then they have
Very
one
true.
body part that just drags behind that they have to train to oblivion. What was one body part that you just don't really need to touch that much? And then what's been one body part that you've just had to drag behind this entire time?
Yeah, so starting with the dragging behind, so one thing that I didn't know, nor my first coach, since I was his first bikini girl, is how important glutes are in the sport. I had never, ever in the entire 4 months of me working out before I got a coach, ever hit glutes, and then even the first few months that I had that first coach didn't do glutes because he didn't really know like anything about the bikini division. And so I would definitely say dragging behind is my glutes because I never trained them before. I really never started to train them until the last year and a half have I really, really been training them. And then for a muscle group that I don't really have to hit as much, I would definitely say my back, for sure, for sure. It grows. I feel like it grows way faster than any part of my body where I will hit back once and I swear my back will be good for like 2 weeks.
Yeah. No, hey, and trust me, that's a good problem to have. But I mean, just dealing with the fact that you are in school and you are still, in this health and fitness phase of yourself, how do you find management for time too? Because I know that you have a job as well and you're in school and then you're also, in the gym. Two of those three things is enough to make one person almost go crazy, but you're doing all three of them. How do you manage that?
So in school, I'm in RTC, and so being in RTC, you are on a pretty strict regimen. Like Monday, Wednesday, we have PTA at 5 in the morning, and then Friday mornings we have drill and stuff like that. It's that whole shebang, and so like I would definitely say like, and so my first and second prep were back to back. So my whole entire sophomore year, from start to finish, I was in prep the whole entire time. Like, not one singular week of my sophomore year of college was I, like, off of prep.
I bet you had a lot of fun that year.
Yeah, it was, I was swarming with friends and parties. It was, I almost say, but then that was, like, the year that I did the best that I've ever done because it just instilled such discipline in me and being in such a strict regimen, especially with, like, I gotta get up this early and then I'm already going to be up, so I might as well go ahead and do my first half of cardio. And then at that point, I'm up and my heart is beating, so I might as well actually go to class. And then so it was just kind of like just being that structured, I guess. And like I do feel like there were some times for sure, where I would be sitting and like working on homework and stuff because I'm also the kind of person where I'm not a procrastinator when it comes to my schoolwork. Like if it's due in 3 days, it will be done. Otherwise, I'll feel like it's late. And so, like, I would be sitting there on the weekends, and the weekends would be the main time that I would have to catch up on my homework because, going to the gym for 2 hours and stuff in the days. Um, and everybody would be, going out to parties, and I would be sitting there doing my calculus. And I took Calc 1 and Calc 2 my sophomore year. It was really messed up. It was. So yeah, that was fun.
You'll never get me to admit this again, but I will admit this for this one podcast. There are times that I've done a podcast and you have like 2 weeks to get it all edited and released, and I am up at 2 a.m. the night of that it's about to be released. So I finish it literally probably about 5 hours before it gets uploaded. I will admit that. So I can do that at times. Now I try to be more like you, but sometimes it just the naturalness in me. And I was always like that in school as well, where the night before the project, I just tell everyone, you know what, we're pulling an all-nighter tonight. So you know what, just get ready. So I can be a little bit more on that opposite end, which is why, again, I don't think I really would have done that great competing because you really have to be that type A regiment, structure. And how much do you think that ROTC did help with that mindset? Because I was not really shocked when I learned that a decent amount of competitors are either ex-military or they do ROTC as well because it's that regimentation. But how much of it do you really think really factored into being able to be in a structured bodybuilding lifestyle?
I would say, because I'm the kind of person, I would have never woken up kind of like the same way about like waking up before 7 a.m. Like I used to be completely what I am now, I used to be completely opposite. Like I always used to work the night shifts at my job and I would always be working till 2 a.m. and I would always get 4 hours of sleep and then go do whatever. And that was my freshman year of college and then also all throughout high school. Like I had never really planned to go to college. It just kind of happened that if you were to tell senior year high school me that I was about to graduate from college, I would not believe you. I would be like, you are lying. I just always planned on just enlisting in the Navy and calling it a day. And so I had never really been a structured person before, ever, 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 ever. And so, like, kind of going through freshman year and just realizing, like, my life was harder because I didn't want to make the hard choices of no guys, like I need to go to bed at this time. Like I was making a lot of easy choices. And then I was exhausted and I was missing classes and stuff my freshman year. And then I was getting in trouble for missing classes. So having to wake up that early and genuinely realizing that I needed to have that kind of sleep and that my grades actually did matter now, because before in high school they didn't really matter, but when you're in ROTC and in college, like they really, really do matter. They hold you to a lot higher of a standard. So I would say it's had a big impact, and like even with just overall holding myself to a higher standard with like workouts and stuff, like I always want to have the best workout because I always want to have the best grades and the best physical fitness and stuff like that.
Do you still try to have somewhat of a social life in the balance of that? Because I know a lot of people, they sacrifice like almost their social life almost completely, and other people try to maintain a little bit of it. But do you still have times where you try to go out and mingle with people, or are you just so focused in on this goal that you're just like, hey, I'll have other times for that?
I will actually say, like, I made a promise to myself this prep that I would do a better job than the last 2 times. Um, so I will say, actually, like, I actually get told all the time, like, people are like, "I don't know, because 'cause I'll go out with my friends and I'll be DD and I'll sip on a Diet Coke and just
Hang on, I got
kind
to
of
interrupt you. That is how the podcast name DD on the Spot came to be, because every Friday I was the designated driver. So when I was coming up with names for the podcast, that's how the DD on the Spot thing came up. Now
I love that.
Saturdays I would lose my mind and just not even be able to talk to people. I'd be that staggered. But Fridays I would always be on the spot. So again, this was not a bodybuilding podcast to start out with. So when I was coming up with names, but then unfortunately, when I probably should have changed the name, it had already stuck and it had already gotten so popular that I couldn't change it. So now everyone's like, "Why the hell is this guy named DD on the Spot when he's interviewing bodybuilders?" And there's your little backstory for you. So the moment she said DD, I had to give her the backstory.
I love that. I It's very rare that you meet people that are willing to be, the the DD and
In all honesty, it was only because like some of the girls that I thought were really attractive would then call me then, and I'd be able to like pick them up and stuff like that, and be seen as the responsible, nice guy. Which it worked out in the end eventually, but I had to wait. I had to wait a while, but that was really the only reason why. It wasn't because I was like, oh, that guy's so humble. It's like no, because there was a girl that I really liked, and I thought that if I would be seen as nice. So again, there's a caveat to it, but I will say I was a savior for a lot of people and probably prevented a lot of deaths. So everyone, your applause is well warranted, everyone. But no, no.
it was true on the DD front. Like even before, like even freshman year when I was all over the place, like I was just never. I've never been a big drinker or anything like that. Like I've always mainly been the D. Somebody's got to do it, and that somebody just so happens to be me and you on Fridays.
Oh no, well that died as soon as I left college. Are you kidding me? Then it's just well maybe like on Thanksgiving's Eve I used to sometimes do that, but that I I do it for my older brother still to this day whenever he has like a wedding to go to or anything like that. But yeah, I try not to, and plus I don't even drink that. I'll probably go out and like really drink probably only a handful of times a year. Once you reach a certain age, which is a painful fact that you will find out in the years to come, you kind of the social opportunities aren't as much as they used to be. So enjoy them while they last. But when you're talking about just this bodybuilding lifestyle and everything, one thing that I've always find fascinating is like if you were to walk out in public, especially in Florida in the summer when you're not really clothed up as much, it's sort of like when people see a mini celebrity where they're just not used to seeing someone who's in such great shape, especially as you're getting ready to step on that stage. What was that like for you to deal with that sort of extra added attention? And as you've done more and more preps, did it get easier for you to accept that? Or was it still something where you're just like, okay, this is kind of weird?
So that's actually funny. So over the summer, before this last prep, I was actually in summer training with the Hilo Squadron, and so I was in Virginia, and that was like the whole entire last 5 weeks of my prep. Like it sucked because here's something that I really wanted to do, but then like being so lean just didn't make it as enjoyable. But we were at it was like a mandatory like water park fun day thing, and at that point I was like a week and a half out. Like I was really close. So when you're like super
That's just
vascular,
asking for it. I'm just going to say it. That's just asking for
yes,
it.
and it was mandated. In my defense, I wasn't even gonna do it to them, but they told me I had to go. So, and like you're just super, and then especially when you're hot, like you get incredibly vascular. And we were waiting in line for one of the slides, and this little girl standing in front of me with her mom, and she looks back at me, and like her eyes get like real wide, and then she like looks at her mom, and she's like, "Mommy, mommy," she's like, "Why does that girl look like that?" And I cried because you're just so sensitive to everything. I cried for an hour. I cried. Like I was very upset.
You should
And
have just done the most meathead response possible. It was like, because I eat my protein or something like that. And they're just like, you should have just done the most. That would have been hilarious. But no, I understand where you're coming from too. Where yeah, it's just the emotions that people don't understand when you're that drained down. It's just
100%. And I'm like, out of all the things you could have said, that really just made me want to punt you right across this water park. Um, but I would say like too, sometimes it's frustrating because people don't really know. So I always get the question like, what sport do you play? And it's like, oh well, that's an interesting question. Like I kind of do this, and it'll just be like really, and for some reason it really pisses me off when people are like, "Oh, do you play volleyball?" And I'm like, "What part about anything about me is screaming
how tall are
volleyball?"
you if they're asking for volleyball?
I'm 5'9".
Okay.
I am.
I'm
Yeah.
6'3", so I understand the tall person struggles when it comes to the gym. So yeah, that's why you're getting the volleyball. Because like if you were like 5'2" and they're like you're playing volleyball, it's like okay, what's going on here? But
Yes, and it's always like that or like the what sport do you play? And it's weird to explain to people too because sometimes when they think when you're like, "Oh, I'm a bodybuilder," they don't see like they expect me to be some massive woman. Like they don't realize there's different categories in women's bodybuilding. So then I sometimes have to explain it when people are like, "Oh, but you're not like, you know." And so that's it can be frustrating sometimes in the sense where people just look at you kind of crazy and then you're like, I'm not like the huge
yeah.
bitches, I'm like the little ones.
Well, exactly, and being on the taller side too. Did you ever find that when you were stepping on stage, it's kind of funny how a lot of the competitors are much shorter than you, and it's kind of hard. At least for me, I always thought it was funny that you're putting some people. You might be going up against someone who's 5 feet tall. And it's like it's hard to judge that person when there's the 9 foot or 9 inch difference in height. It's really hard to. So, what was that like going to a show and realizing that like yeah, you are extremely on the taller side, especially for the sport?
Yeah, so for bikini they put you out into height division. So you're gonna go against people that are mainly in your height class, but then if you win your height class, then you go against people from other height classes, which is where the shorter girls play in for sure. And like sometimes I saw this reel the other day and it was like my short friend who had one protein shake and it was like some roided out midget guy and I'm like, man, that's so true. Because it's not like they just look so much more muscular, you know. There's less space. So that for sure, sometimes like this last show that I did, I won my height class and then, lined up. And like, even if somebody's 2 inches shorter than me, I'm like, you have an unfair advantage. You have an unfair advantage.
And then meanwhile, like the guest I talked to earlier today, she has a husband who is 6'2", 240 pounds competitor as well. And you're just like, okay, that's just. I've talked to some genetic freaks, trust me too. I can send you something like there's a figure competitor I talked to who's 6 feet tall and she's just a brick shithouse basically. And then those are some of those genetic freaks where you're just like, okay, you're just blessed so immensely, and it pisses me off so much. And it has to happen, but I mean,
It has to happen.
it has to happen every once in a while because there has to be that one person that you look at where you're just like, okay, there has to be that one shack out there where you're just like, okay, whatever, just get over it. But yeah, exactly. But we got to talk about posing because that is one of the things that I never imagined before I started this podcast is one of the hardest things for so many people. What has your experience been like with posing?
So with posing, I had never worn a singular pair of heels in my whole entire life until competing. So it doesn't look very natural on me at all. I kind of look like a deer just because and even now, third show, even practicing, it's very uncomfortable for me. Like I'm for sure kind of a bro in the sense where like when I walk, I shuffle, I wear Converse, like I don't have the best posture. You can probably actually tell right now as I'm sitting here like this.
You're not doing the sassy bikini twirls and everything and just
Yeah, like that is so not me. So that is definitely like one part about the sport where I'm like, oh, I just wish because I feel like a lot of people have posing over me for sure, and it's been something that I work on, but it is definitely. And then for my first show, I didn't start posing until I was about 3 weeks out because I just had no idea. I had no flippin' clue what the posing was going to be. And I can remember my first posing thing literally 3 weeks out from my show, and I was flabbergasted. I was seriously debating if I even still wanted to do it because of how much I still had to learn. And that's actually how I met the coach that I have now. is he was my posing coach, and we had so much to catch up on that then I had to go over there twice a week for 3 weeks, and we just really hit it off in a like client coach way. Like we get along great. And he's very, very knowledgeable, and he's had a lot of experience with bikini girls, and he is one of like the best posing coaches. So even me with like one of the best posing coaches in Florida, I'm still like walking around like looking kind of crazy. He always gets on to me. He's like, please practice more. I'm trying. I'm trying.
Well, especially with the height too in those heels. I mean, it's like there should be a height cutoff even for bikini where they're like, if you're like above like 5'6" or something like that, it's like you don't have to wear heels because
Yes.
it's like, good God. And that's why I know some people literally specifically have gone up to figure, or they've gone up to physique from figure just for that fact alone that they don't have to wear those heels. That has been a factor for so many people.
Right.
But yeah, it's just incredible. And then, I mean, out of your bikini poses or out of what you do, what is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
So I would say that my front pose is a lot stronger than my back pose just because I do lack in the glutes. That was one of my biggest feedbacks from my last show is more glute development. So I do like my front pose. And as I've developed more in my shoulders, and I am genetically blessed with like a good core. So when I'm lean like that, like that's definitely my pose for sure. Front pose.
I remember I saw that I was looking through your Instagram to get like some videos and photos to use as visual aids when you're talking. I saw that one of your abs where it was like going up and then you just saw the veins and everything on that when you were like all tan too. And I was like, do I really even have to talk to her now and stuff like that? I'm in my winter bulk right now, so I'm, putting on the, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, my uncle makes this homemade beef jerky and I've had like 40 bits of it, and I do that every year, and it got to the point where Christmas morning I was sleeping on my back and I rolled over to my side for 1 second and I was like, okay, that's the worst thing I've ever done in my entire life, because I was completely full, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna have a stomach, I'm gonna have a stomach explosion right here, so I had to roll over on the other side. But yeah, the moment that I see, and then of course that stuff has to be on my phone. Where like all of a sudden, just Instagram will recommend to me, hey, you want to see the most shredded person of all time in their 8-pack while you're doing that. So Instagram is a funny thing with that. But I mean, you have an Instagram account as well, and I'll plug it to everyone. Everyone go and check it out. I'll leave a link down below. But one of the positive things about Instagram, obviously, is that I wouldn't be able to do this podcast without it. It's helped me connect with so many people. But one of the negatives that I could assume for a lot of competitors, I would be, if I was a competitor, I would be that one person that I would check on people that I knew where I was going to compete against and see their best photos that are all, in the perfect pose. They're all glammed up. And I would be like, okay, I can't compete against them just because I would, just mess in my mind. Did you ever struggle with that where you might have inadvertently saw some photos of someone that you knew might be at the show and you're like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do with this? Or are you one of those people where you're just eyes on the prize, don't care about any distractions?
So 100% actually. So there had been some boy that I was hanging out with, kind of at the beginning of right before I started prep, and then it had turned out that his ex-girlfriend was doing DJC, which is the one that I did, and we like kind of had like a similar circle in the sense of like gyms, people that we knew, and the crazy part is like I rarely ever meet girls that are as tall as me, but we're almost the exact same height. And so it's me and this
Do
girl.
you think that guy might have a thing then for that certain?
I know, right? Does he? She's blonde too, beautiful. Does he have a type or what? But so I remember, and then he was just like, "Oh yeah," like just kind of making it a thing. And so I would check her stuff. I would probably say almost every 2 days because I knew for 100% fact that I was going to be going against her. And then now there was like almost kind of like a pressure, of like, oh, this is, and I knew that she knew who I was too because I would see that she would watch my stuff sometimes, even though at the time we weren't following each other. And so like I'm talking like I'll look at her TikTok, I'll look at her Instagram, I'll look at her tagged photos sometimes. And then now it's so funny because I was so worried, and like I specifically had downloaded, this is actually kind of embarrassing, but I had specifically downloaded Pic Collage and put one of her pictures next to one of my pictures on Picture Collage just so that I could see. And like I remember asking my coach's girlfriend, I'm like, do you think that she's gonna beat me? Just hyper focused on it. And it became something where like my friends, when I would be like not wanting to do cardio, they're like, oh, I'm gonna go ahead and say her name because we're actually best friends now. But they're like, oh, I bet you Jillian isn't complaining about doing her cardio right now. Like, I bet you she's doing it. So it almost became a way for like my friends to.
Was it Jillian Michaels this whole time?
No, Jillian Snowden.
No, I know. Wait, Snowden? Any relation to Edward Snowden?
I have no idea.
No, it was just a joke. No, so trust me. And another reason why I can't be dealing with people like you when you're that depleted is seriously the fact that if you were to tell me like, am I just as pretty as her, or do I look as good as her? I would just be like, no, you're not going to win, just to mess with you, just to really get that down. So, but no,
that's kind of like what some people started doing with me. And then after the show, though, so we didn't talk to each other at all at the show. Like, it was obviously a little bit standoffish because she knew who I was and I knew who she was. But after the show, I wasn't talking to that person anymore, like the boy, and I just kind of figured, I'm like, that's really stupid of me to have somebody against this girl I don't even know just because of this guy who doesn't mean anything to me. So we worked out together, and this is actually, I don't know how to flip my camera on here. Yeah. I did it. This is actually what she gave me for Christmas. That's us.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so, like, actually made one of, like, the best friends that I've ever made out of it. Yeah. That's the same girl who I used to stalk every day, being like, is she gonna beat me?
No, and it's incredible the friendships that you make in this sport, too, because it's unlike most, especially the female side that I've come to find, where, like, there's definitely a sisterhood there, and I call it, just because it's joint suffering, too, that's a really big bonding, and being in the ROTC, you can understand that too. You really bond with people when you're going through hell together, basically. But yeah, it's just a different breed of people that do that. But when you are stepping on that stage, what is that feeling like for you?
So I get really nervous. I have really bad stage anxiety. I've seen people go up there for the first time and they own it and it looks like they've done it a million times. But for me, I actually get really, really, really anxious. But it's an amazing, I swear, I like black out during it. I really, really do, because it's just like, whoa, like what's going on? So it's such a rush. It's the biggest adrenaline rush. Like, I've gone skydiving, I've had my fair share of like almost dies on a motorcycle, but like nothing compares to stepping on stage.
Please don't tell me you've ever driven a motorcycle on Prep Brain.
No.
Okay, good. Because I was going to say, that is really pushing it.
Not yet. No, I'm just kidding.
Do you have any funny Prep Brain stories? Because I love to just cultivate those and just collect them, because I find that it's so funny, just how dedicated people are to this sport, that they just are so drained that they do some things that someone like me who has never been that drained just find slightly amusing.
So I have one, but I do have one specific thing that always happens to me. It's happened to me all 3 times. When I get at a certain point, it's normally about 3-4 weeks out, I lose, like, bladder control. I don't know, I've done some research on it. It's like a hormonal thing, your hormones are a little bit out of whack, and that, like, controls when you pee and stuff. So for the last 3 weeks of prep, I'm pissing myself at the gym, like, constantly having to go to the bathroom because I just peed myself on that machine. And you know what? I'm just gonna wipe it down and act like it didn't happen. Sometimes not even use the sanitizer spray if I can't find it.
All right, everyone, you can take a photo from this podcast and you can plaster it and say, "Do not let this woman in if she's in contest prep into your shit." No, but there was that one time, I don't know if you were around for that, but it was like probably like 2 or 3 years ago, where there was a famous powerlifter who would just she would be doing deadlifts or something, and it would just be like like an ocean out of her.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Actually. Yeah. Yeah. And then the first time I saw it, I was like, wait, what? And then people were like, oh yeah, we just have a towel underneath her. And I was like, how is that a thing? Like, if I saw that happening at the thing, I would be like, what the fuck is going on, basically? So, but apparently, and I did do my own research into it too, because I was like, there's no way. Because then people down below were like, oh yeah, I've suffered through the same thing. And then apparently, yeah, there is a thing where, especially with hormones involved, where people lose somewhat of a bladder control. And that made me think, okay, it's a little bit better. It's still one of the grossest things ever. I will just admit that to everyone. I think we can all admit that, but these people can't really control it. But then it's like, so the moment you saw that, I had to replay that video in my head from when I first saw it, and I was like, so thank you for that. I hope that I would never have to see that video in my head again, but now it's stuck in there, and I'll probably be thinking about that tonight when I go to sleep. But no, it was a big learning experience for me too, because I learned something that obviously, I had never thought of, but we got to talk about the C word, which I hate more than life itself. It's cardio. And cardio, God, even saying it just adds a little bit of sour taste in my mouth. I go for walks all the time, but when it comes to the actual cardio thing, no thank you. But unfortunately, when you become a bodybuilder, you're starting to deal with the devil when it comes to cardio. What is your relationship like with cardio?
So my cardio has actually so for some people as they compete, their cardio gets to get lower and lower as, their body as I get more into it and stuff, but actually progressively throughout the preps, my cardio has had to get higher and higher because for ROTC, I do run a decent amount even in my off season, so my body is used to that stimulus. So when it's time for me to get really lean, we have to push it beyond my baseline stimulus, which is running at least 4 to 5 times a week. And then, like, I just did an 11-mile run the other day, and this is like in my
I
off
saw that, and I was going to talk to you about that, but you beat me to it.
yeah. So, and that's like literally me just off season. So then when it's time for me to actually prep and actually have to lose it, my cardio has to get decently high in the sense of like in my rest days, on my rest days before this last one, I was doing an hour and 15 minutes on my rest days, and then I believe 50 minutes on my training days. So that always comes back to kick me in the butt, but it just comes with trying to be overall more athletic. Sometimes you have to take some big L's, and that is one of them.
Absolutely. And what have been some of the things that you've really learned about yourself as you've taken on this drastic lifestyle? And when I say drastic, I don't mean drastic in a bad way, but it is drastic based on, all the things that happen to you when you're going through it.
So I learned so for my first two preps I had a long-term boyfriend, and I didn't think that I would be able to do a prep without him in the sense where I thought that that was my support system and I didn't know how. And then the whole thing with the social life, I was like, wow, I'm really going to have nobody now. So I would say it's taught me to keep my standards really, really high. Like obnoxiously high. In the sense where I'm like, if I'm putting this much time into myself, like hours every single day, why would I ever accept somebody to treat me not like I'm putting hours into myself? So that's kind of what it's taught me about myself in the sense of like holding high standards and not negotiating with myself. Like if I say that I'm going to do something, even if I really don't want to do it when the time comes, like I'm going to do it regardless.
I will say that before I started this podcast, if I saw someone that was in pretty good shape, I'd be like, and when they're like, hey, you want to date him? I'd be like, yeah, I might give it a chance, but no offense to people on this podcast, but after talking to all of you guys and realizing the dedication and drive, there is no way in hell because I could not deal with that. First of all, just having someone get up next to me that early in the morning too is one of the deal breakers. Honestly, that's why anytime it's a school teacher or anything like that, I'm like, okay, I'll make that work. But it's like with the drive and the dedication, like, and I would feel so bad just like eating regular food in front of you as well. Like I could not. So, that's why people are always like, well, are you ever interested in any guests you have? And I was like, until I realized their drive and dedication. And then you're just like, okay, this is just going to be, especially like I've talked to people like they start dating right before prep. And I was like, just start dating the day after the prep ends, really. And then figure that out before you dive right into it. But, hey, and
that's why I don't have a boyfriend anymore. It's just prep ruined it for me.
Be like me and be dating a dietitian who really, she just works out a little bit, but she doesn't, do anything that extreme. Although with dietitians, every single time, like I might go out and get like McDonald's fry, like the once a month that I do that, she'll just give me that little, like, are you sure about that? And I'll be like, shut up. Just come on now. You put me through all this hell. And then she'll just be like listing all this stuff. And I was like, I even tell her, I was like, you're not on the clock when you're with me, right? And then, but so we have fun, but no, it's all the little things that I love to bring up in this lifestyle because, like I told you before, so many people just don't get all the little things that happen in this sport. But going off stage and, putting on that weight afterwards because people don't understand that you're not your healthiest by far when you step on that stage. What is that like sort of dealing with the fact that, you see yourself at this unbelievable package and then you have to put on weight afterwards? How do you deal with that?
So I've always done a really good job sticking to my reverse, which I've seen it's not easy. Like it's still really, really hard for me. But I've definitely grown from my second prep was actually the hardest for me, especially with putting weight back on. Like, my coach allows me 1 cheat meal a week in my off season, which is amazing, but, like, even when I would take my 1 cheat meal, I would find myself doing an hour and a half of cardio on my off season on my cheat meal days, or throwing it up, like, it was one of the 2, and because just mentally, like, I couldn't get past that, um, but this off season, I've done a much better job with it, and I feel more confident right now, and I've gained 25 pounds since the end of July, but on a structured regimen, so very slowly but surely. Um, and so it's really, really hard, I'm not gonna lie, especially because I feel like for me, people are always like, "Oh my god, yeah, you have abs." So not really having them is like, "Oh, like, who am I?
Oh my God, the
Whoa."
amount of people that I talked to before I finally realized that, like, yeah, these people are advertising themselves, especially if you're on Instagram and they see you as that. And the fact that they don't understand that that is something that you might look like for maybe a month at most in
Mhm.
the entire year. And then the whole rest of the year, I'm not gonna say you're an average looking person. You're just
Right.
but you have more size than people and stuff, but like you have an average-ish shape when you're, especially when you're clothed and stuff. But that's one thing that people just don't understand is that, and I've had people who, the worst thing that you can ever say to a bodybuilder is if you walk up to him and you say, "Hey, are you still competing or working out?"
I swear that is, like, one of the main reasons why, like, I love the gym that I go to now, but now I mainly go to another gym down by the beach because I've worked out at this one gym for the last 2 years, and my last off season, like I said before, I was throwing up my meals and stuff, so I stayed pretty lean last off season, but this off season, I've actually put on a decent amount of weight. I go in there for the first time in, like, a month, and one of the guys says to me, he's like, "Oh my god." It's like, "You blew up." And I was like, have you ever been punched in the face before? Have you? Because I promise you, this might be the first day that you do." Yeah, that's like one of the main reasons why, like, it's really hard for me to go to that gym now, just because it is a lot of people that are used to always seeing me that lean and they're like, "Oh my god, like, what are you eating?" And like, but it's like, I'm still on a very strict diet. I eat 7 times a day right now, like, with and I still only have 1 cheat meal a week, but it's a part of the process, and I just keep telling myself, like, since I'm doing this, like, I'm gonna be better come June and hopefully gain more muscle.
Well, on top of that, let's just face the fact, when you sign up for bodybuilding, you agree that you are never going to be big enough. You're never going to be good enough, no matter. And I've talked to Olympia winners, and it still fascinates me to this day that even after winning the Olympia, let's say 2 or 3 times in a row, they're still like, "Oh, there's still a lot of stuff that I need to work on." But how do you deal with that fact of just, this is always going to be gnawing at people, that when they're competing, it's always something, it's nothing that they're ever going to be content with. You're always going to want more and more. How do you deal with the fact that nothing is ever good enough once you start this?
That's a good question in the sense where I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna deal with that too, because it's constantly where it keeps me up at night sometimes, because these things take time. So it's like if there was something that I could do, if it meant that I had to be in the gym for 72 hours straight just to gain 1 pound of muscle, like, I'd do it. But I know that it's just all about time and sleep. So that's what I just keep telling myself is that's another thing too, being younger. Like, I go against a lot of people that have a lot more muscle maturity on me because they've been doing it for a lot more years. So it's just kind of telling myself, like, I just need to give myself time. But it is definitely very frustrating because I cannot name one time that I've genuinely been like, oh, everything on me today looks great. I'm perfect. I'm Barbie. Like, never, never has that happened. Actually, my roommate, she's about to compete, and she's never been on a diet before or anything really, but she's been working out for a long time, so she has a decent amount of muscle maturity on her. But she tells me, she was like, "Oh, um, I'm already really struggling because I feel like I look huge." And I'm like, "Where? Send me the link for where you found this feeling because I would like to purchase it. I would really like to."
Oh my God, yeah. So wait, so you have 2 meatheads in the same apartment. How do you guys deal with each other being both both competing?
So she hasn't competed yet. So
Okay.
I've lived with her for 2 years, and I've been trying to convince her for the last 2 years to do it, and she has finally been suckered in. I have had a total of 5 friends that I've suckered into competing.
Okay, what
Just
the hell is your pitch if you're that successful? Because I have never talked to anyone that's like that. 5 people
really.
that you've convinced, yeah.
So normally it's people that kind of show like a little bit of an interest in it, like, oh, what do you eat? What does your training? And normally the way that I bring it to them is I don't so much promote competing to them as I promote like specifically the team and the coaches that I'm with. I'm like every single week. And I know that I'm always going to look exactly how I'm supposed to look. And I never question how I'm supposed to look because somebody else is in charge of it. And that's kind of how and the other thing that I always say to people when they bring it up to me, like, oh, I'm thinking about it, is I'm like, you don't want to look back. Like right now, you're going to be in the best shape of your life. You don't want to look back at this in 20 years and wish that you had done it at least once. Because I have some friends that I've convinced, they're like, that is my other roommate who she moved back to New York, but I had convinced her to do it. And she told me she was, calling me, going through the prep, crying. And she was like, I love you, Chloe. And I'm so glad that you convinced me to do it, but I will never do it again. And that's the other thing that I tell them is like, you don't have to do it more than once, but you don't ever want to have the regret of wondering what could have been, and also like the networking that I've gotten to do through it, just networks that I would have never in a million years have ever had, and the community that I have because of it. Like my team is we're we're like family. And so that's kind of really how I push it is the team, not so much the competition, but being on a team, having a coach. And a lot of people tend to be happier with how they look if somebody else is telling them that it's right, if that makes sense.
Well, geez, the armed forces, just hire her as a recruiter already. If she's already able to convince people to, or IFBB, reach out, have her be your official recruiter where she just goes to gyms and sees people that look like they could come and just goes and convince them. Because that is insane that you were able to do that. Because yeah, this is not a sport that I think a lot of people would look at and be like, yeah, you know what? That seems like something I could do. Now, obviously, like you said, there are people that show interest and you're able to get off that, but still, that is, incredibly, incredibly impressive. But I mean, someone were to also walk up to you and say, Chloe, we made the decision. You can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding. And it can be more than one. Just depends, if you have more than one thing. But you could change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it. What would be one thing that you'd like to see changed?
Oh, man. Um, hmm. I would say huh, a lot of people always talk about like it's such a like subjective sport, and obviously I know that it's almost impossible to like pull out subjectivity out of it, but like sometimes like I get a lot of self-doubt in myself where I'm like, I need to take a longer off season because I need to build a lot more muscle. But then like at national shows and stuff, I'll see girls getting their pro cards that weren't necessarily more muscular. So and I know that that just comes with understanding the criteria and different judges and stuff like that. So I don't but that's also kind of what I think is like the beauty about the sport is like it's not necessarily being the most muscular, but it's being the most like developed in these certain areas. I don't want to say like having the same judges at every show because I know that that would be impossible. But I guess because it's very interesting. Like some of them prefer softer looks and some of them prefer harder looks. So I would probably say something along those lines.
Yeah, judging is something that is just I mean, I've had a few judges on and it's hard to explain to a lot of people, but I find that part so fascinating too because anytime you're in something that's human judgment, trust me, I was a baseball pitcher and there were times where I wanted to tell the catcher, "Hey, just move aside on this next pitch and we're just going to drill this umpire here basically because anytime you're in a sport with human error, it can be like that." But that's something I'd like to see change too, where they just have like an overall model. Like they make like a sculpture, like a Michelangelo, and they just say, "This is what we want exactly." Like if you can get as close to this, then you're gonna do because yeah, like you said, subjective. Some people might want a little bit more of a lower body development. Some people might want a bit more of upper body development. Some people might want you more shredded. Other people might like a little bit more of a fuller look. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's really just navigation.
It is, and but I also think it's hard because it's also what I think makes the sport so like addicting. Is like you never know exactly how it's going to turn out. Like you literally never know.
Unless you're like Andrea Shaw or something like that, which I've had her on, but like that's just a given where everyone's just like, okay, who's coming in second, which is it's something out there. But yeah, and when we do have you on in a year, because I love to talk to you in a year just to see what you've been up to. Where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding? Where would you like to be at just in your overall life? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved in a year?
Yeah, so I leave for flight school in August in Pensacola. So I would like to be at flight school in a year. And I will be doing junior nationals in June. So mainly, I don't have high hopes of like, I'm going to go and get my pro card, but I really wanted to step on a national stage before I went off to flight school, and really see what I really needed to focus on. Because if there ever was a time for me to take a 2-year growing season, it would be during flight school. So figure out if that's what I need to do, then kind of set that path there. Um, but getting a pro card would be really freaking cool, but I'm also a realist, you know? Um, so yeah, in a year, I'd like to be in school, definitely
God,
still
just thinking
working.
about prep brain pilots is just a nightmare that I don't even want to. That should be a title of a horror movie right there. We got some
Yeah.
pilots on prep brain there, but I do got to ask this little tangent question because I hate flying. I hate flying more than anything. It's just the turbulence too. Do they teach you anything to how to deal with that? Because I'm one of those people now where like I would just have to take an Ambien and just like knock myself out so that I'm just asleep the entire time that I'm on a plane. But how do you? I mean, because to me it's just I just can't stand. That's the one thing where, and I've had flights where like there's no turbulence at all and I'm completely fine. But and minimal turbulence I'm fine with too. But there are other times too where I was like, oh God, this is it, isn't it? Well, it was a good run.
I don't know if there's any. I don't really know much about. I just recently decided this year that it was something that I
Oh,
wanted to
okay.
give a shot, and so I haven't. I didn't. I'm gonna be completely honest. It was kind of a shot in the dark. Like it's a pretty competitive, and so I didn't really know if I was gonna get it or not. But I was like, it's one of those things where I was like, I don't want, myself in 20 years to regret not trying. Just same thing with competing. And so I went ahead and I gave it my best shot, and they were like, okay. So yeah, I don't know much about flying at all, but I have a lot to learn.
Well, aren't you someone that just jumps in on the seat of your pants and just says,
Yeah.
"Hey, let's go ahead and let's do it." Hey, and I like that because that is a personality type that does not exist as much as it should, especially nowadays, especially in the younger generation too as well. A lot more people have everything planned out for them and they're a lot more structured and hey, I am completely fine with it going the other way too. And before we wrap things up, first of all, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
A shout out to um
Your coach.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I was gonna get there. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, big shout out to my coach, Steve with Flawless Physique and Brittany with Flawless Physique. They are I don't even have the words to describe like how phenomenal they are. Like they are life coaches. They are like even though Steve is my bodybuilding coach, like during school I'll text him when I get a really good grade on a test or after like a PT test for RTC, and 100% like the reason why I keep doing what I do too.
No, and that's great as well. And I'll leave a link to all that stuff down below. But Chloe, I cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing your journey with us. It was an absolute delight. Oh, and lastly, is there anyone that you really follow that you really are really into? And like, if you could meet anyone in the fitness world, who would it be?
I would say anyone in the fitness world. I really like her name's Kayla Ashworth. She's an IFBB pro, and she just really, especially during this last off season, I'll watch her stuff, and she's all about training hard because a lot of bikini girls will see a lot of stuff with like really focusing on small light movements and stuff, but she's kind of more of like a lift heavy. Like one time I watched her bench press 135 for it was like 13 or 15 reps, and I was like, wow, I've just never seen another bikini girl ever do that before. So for sure, her.
I believe I've talked to her. See, the problem is when you talk to so many people, there are times that you hear a name and you're like, I think I've talked to them, and you gotta look back and sure, but I think I might have had her on too. And I know that you were a fan of Isa Rodriguez as well, and
Yeah.
she's awesome. I mean, she was one of those people where I was like, wait, you're 18 and I'm talking to you, and I was like, screw you. Basically, yeah, it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun for me because I was like, I need to reevaluate things. If I'm talking to someone that looks like that, is that young, but I mean,
And she's sick, and she works out real hard too. I like watching her stuff.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I'll go ahead then and I'll leave a link down below for Chloe for everyone to go and give her a follow on her Instagram page. Barbie World, you will get inspired to get off that couch and stop eating all those Twinkies. But again, Chloe, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone. This is Ryan Johnson, DD on the Spot, signing off. Have a great day, everyone.